There has been a high-level U.S. congressional delegation which was led by the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the Republican chairman McCaul, who visited Dalai Lama in Dharamshala in India, where he resides in exile. The delegation met with the representatives of the Tibetan government in exile to discuss the Tibetan autonomy under the Chinese rule. This visit follows the bipartisan U.S. legislative efforts urging China to engage in dialogue to resolve the long-standing Tibetan conflict. Meanwhile, the U.S. House of Representatives also passed the bill promoting a resolution to the Tibet-China Dispute Act, also known as the Resolve Tibet Act. It is now headed to President Joe Biden for a signature to become a law, and the U.S. delegation meeting with the Dalai Lama underscores the significance of the bill that was passed by the Congress. Despite China's objections, the U.S. officials have continued to engage with the Dalai Lama, underscoring the ongoing U.S. support for Tibetan rights amidst the international scrutiny of China's policies and of Tibet. Ambassador Veena Sikri, there has been a very strong statement that has come from Nancy Pelosi that has targeted the Chinese President Xi Jinping. There perhaps has not been such a strong statement that has been made by any of the world leaders against Xi Jinping. What does this reflect of the American attitude and carrying forward their association with China, particularly when it comes to the autonomous region of Tibet that is in control of the Chinese?
Yeah, it's a very significant statement indeed. The entire visit to Dharamshala, the meeting with Honorable Dalai Lama, is really a very significant moment for several reasons. First of all, this is a bipartisan group. Nancy Pelosi, as you know, has been Speaker of the House, and she has never hesitated to speak out strongly on the subject of Tibet. But this time, the delegation is led by the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, who is a Republican, as you said, Mr. McCaul. So I think this bipartisan nature reflects strongly on the views, the bipartisan views in the US Congress on this important subject of Tibet.
Yeah.
And I think that Nancy Pelosi herself, as you will recall, 2 years ago, she had been to Taiwan. She physically visited Taiwan, and that at that time itself had led off to a strong reaction from the government of China, and and strong action against Taiwan, restrictions on trade, and so on, and some military action, in the surrounding areas as well. But I think that the fact that Nancy Pelosi from the Democrats is on this delegation to Dharamshala is an important indication of how the Democratic Party feels, because we know that at the same time there have been all kinds of overtures from the Democratic government to China. There have been visits by Secretary of State Blinken, by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and others who have been trying to give a much softer approach to the differences of opinion between China and USA. But this particular visit at this time has really, as they would say, put the cat among the pigeons as far as China is concerned. And we've seen that just earlier this month, I think on the 11th of June, there was a similar resolution in the Canadian Parliament supporting the rights of the people of Tibet. So that also shows, again, despite the fact that Prime Minister Trudeau's government does so-called have a good relationship with China, and the very fact that at that time the House, the Canadian Parliament, passed a unanimous resolution, even though at that time of the voting, Prime Minister Trudeau was not in the House, but still. So both USA and Canada taking this approach at this time is significant.
Something which is very welcoming. Stay on with me, Ambassador. I'm also being joined right now by Yudon Akutsang. She is part of the Tibetan Parliament in exile. The Tibetan Parliament in exile members were also met by Nancy Pelosi and the delegation that came along with her from the United States of America. Very interested in knowing the conversation that was had, the statements that have come out from the United States side, that they support the Tibetan government, Tibetan Parliament in exile, and obviously stand with the Tibetans in fighting for their rights, the human rights violations that have been conducted by the Chinese for far too long.
Yeah, that's true. It's really a very eventful day today. we've had a very high-level, bipartisan U.S. congressional delegation visiting Dharamsala, which we think and we all know as Little Tibet in India, where the Indian government has been very, very helpful in supporting our movement, and we've been here. So today we are actually rejoicing with this bipartisan, high-level U.S. delegation, congressional delegation, and it's bipartisan, headed by as Mrs. Sikri mentioned, the House Foreign Affairs Committee chair, who is a Republican. So it's McCaul, Mr. McCaul, and former Speaker of the U.S. House, U.S. Congress, Nancy Pelosi. And then there's Jim McGovern, who has always been a very deeply committed representative for working on Tibet. So we're very excited. The Resolve Tibet Act has been passed. The final stages and the final procedural vote happened just recently. And now we are awaiting Joe Biden's, the president's signature, which should be happening in 2 weeks. And basically the crux of this Resolve Tibet Act is that the US Congress has fully supported the fact that Tibet was never a part of China. And they have been very much now in support of countering this Chinese narrative of Tibet being a part of China, of really kind of pushing to fight the disinformation that China is spreading, and the fact that there should be peaceful negotiation without any precondition. Those are the
Ms.
two main crux.
Yeah, negotiations to be had, but what is it that the Tibet parliamentarians in exile want with this resolution being signed and made an act by the United States of America?
Well, like I said before, this is really what now the U.S. Congress has stood very firmly, and they are directing the U.S. the State Department to really stand up with it and to really do multilateral kind of efforts with other countries to push for this negotiation for Tibet, like come with a negotiated settlement on Tibet and kind of counter this Chinese fake narrative of Tibet always being a part of China. And also really kind of supporting the fact that Tibet was never a part of China. I think these two are main crux, I think, of this.
What hope do you have of Tibet being returned to Tibetans and taken away from control of the Chinese government?
Yeah, that's what we are really fighting for. We are really fighting for a negotiated settlement where Tibetans get the right to self-determination, to govern themselves. That's what we are seeking. Yes,
Okay. Now, there have been a number of such visits that have taken place. There have been a number of resolutions, conversations that have been had in the United States Senate, in the congressional meetings, and this meeting is very significant in the outright support that America shows and provides to the Tibetans and your cause. There has been, as Ambassador Sikri also mentioned, similar resolutions being picked up in the Canadian Parliament as well. Do you think with the rest of the globe and particularly important powers coming together, there could be the desire and hope for Tibet to be a country of its own may turn into a reality very soon?
Definitely. Actually, the exiled government's policy at the moment is middle way approach. We are seeking autonomy, a genuine autonomy for Tibetans. The future, we don't know what future holds for us, but this is our policy, our current policy. And now with this policy, with this Tibet Act, Resolve Tibet Act, if it becomes a policy signed by the US president, then this will affirm the State Department's, US State Department's responsibility to coordinate with other governments in multilateral efforts towards this goal of coming to a negotiated agreement on Tibet. And this is very important.
Okay.
Despite Chinese foreign ministries, strong kind of, protest, I think the US government the US president must sign this and make it a policy, and then others will follow suit, I'm sure.
Mr. Akutsan, what is the support that you are seeking from the Indian government now that the momentum has been built?
Well, the Indian government has always been very, very supportive. We are here in India for the past, since 1959, and now we want to see a much more proactive support from the in the Indian Parliament, from the members of the Parliament, from the Indian government. Let's see what maybe the U.S. government under the Tibet Policy Act in the past has a Tibet coordinator, a special coordinator for Tibet. Maybe something like that. If not exactly, the first step could be maybe having some kind of a desk for Tibet, within the MEA. I think something like that. I think we should walk towards having more of a, and also kind of, negotiating with China on having councils, because in the past we've also said that there should be consulates. Indian consulate in Lhasa should be revived.
Yeah.
We had it in the past. We must have it again.
So, an action
like
that has already been taken by the United States of America in setting up a consulate. At least there were talks of setting up a consulate in Tibet, and if there could be more countries who will support this cause, well, it will definitely turn the tide in favor of the Tibetans who've been fighting this war. Stay on with me, Ms. Akutsang. I also have with me Tenzin Sandhu, who is an activist, a Tibetan activist. He has been fighting for the cause of an autonomous Tibet for a very long time. Thank you, Tenzin, for joining me on the telecast. And of course, talking about Tibetans and their long fight for autonomy, there has already been points mentioned by Ms. Akutsang about the resolution and a bipartisan support that has been shown by the American Congress. How do talks move on from here? How can these talks be translated into action? How soon do you think there can be movement in the direction that the Tibetans want?
Yes. Firstly, this is not a resolution. It's a bill that is now being finally being signed by the president. So it's going to be law. So this is going to be the official US policy towards Tibet. And the significance of this is, for the first time, we have one country who is directly addressing the issue of Tibet and taking it up with China. And here, the essence of this law is, it says that in the past, Tibet was a free and independent country. And it says that, therefore, today's status that Tibet is an occupied country. And along with it, it says that the Tibetan people have right to self-determination. So the United States is not prescribing independence or autonomy. The United States is saying is that the Tibetan people have the right to self-determination. So these are the 3 points that is the essence of this Resolve Tibet Act. Now, this is not going to directly resolve the issue of Tibet, but this is the most significant step the United States is taking. It means that the United States will, from now on, act on this, and this as a policy, and this will guide the United States' relationship with China vis-a-vis Tibet. Firstly, because it's the first recognition of Tibet as a country. Secondly, United States and its allies and many other countries the United States works with, for example, Canada. Canada has already taken up this issue in the lower house. And it's likely that New Zealand or Australia or UK or many other countries are likely to take it up, and maybe even European Union. So these are going to be serious issues that will be raised about Tibet. So for the first time, issue of Tibet is going to be seriously discussed. Now, important not because that the United States love Tibetan people or have extra respect for the Dalai Lama, so therefore they are taken up. No.
Okay. You absolutely, you mentioned about how it's a long road ahead for Tibet to become autonomous and away from the control of the Chinese. Again, a bill urging Beijing to re-engage with the Dalai Lama and other Tibetan leaders to peacefully resolve their dispute over the status and the governance of Tibet. Now, what are the first initial steps you are hoping that will be part of the negotiation dialogue with China? And will China fall in line over the kind of responses United States of America and Canada and other countries are seeking in cooperation from Xi Jinping's side?
Right. So importance of this Resolve Tibet Act is, firstly, it will bring about visibility about Tibet in the international arena because of the United States support, and is likely to be taken up by many other countries. So visibility about the issue of Tibet. Secondly, when we talk about Tibet, when there is a recognition of Tibet, it's 2.5 million square kilometer of land. It's 1/4 the size of China. And China is not going to keep silent about it. China's ambition to dislodge United States and become the supreme most powerful country in the world, that's what China's ambition is. So there's no denying about it. So when United States is recognizing 1/4 of the size of China as a country that had been occupied, this will also bring about ripple effects. That what about East Turkestan, which is another 1.8 million square kilometer of land, and what about southern Mongolia? So this will dislodge China. This is seriously question China's national area and the population they are controlling. So this will raise the most significant question about China's imperialism and colonization, with which they have been running 60% of China's landmass as their country, but these are in real occupied countries.
Okay. Vijay Kranti, talking about Chinese illegal occupation, it's not just limited to Tibet, South Mongolia. We talk about East Turkestan. We talk about the plight of Muslims living in China and being ill-treated, being exploited. And then we talk about the South China Sea and these illegal invasions that are being made, the transgressions that are being made by the Chinese in the territories of Philippines. And in fact, a new law that they have come out and said that they have the right to take stringent action against foreign ships and vessels who, quote unquote, illegally enter into the South China Sea waters.
I would rather focus on South China Sea has been discussed already a lot, but today is a very, very historic day as far as America, Tibet and China are concerned. I am saying it so as a journalist and as a Tibetologist who has been watching Tibet more than 50 years very keenly. This is first time in the history after China occupied Tibet that America has come out so openly in support of Tibet and against America. If you look at, I have studied these bills which were passed. One bill, the HR 533, which we are talking today, that this bipartisan delegation which has come, they have passed in the Congress in February and then in June again. More than that, there were two earlier other bills which became act. One was the Tibet Policy Act of 2002, and the other was Tibet Policy Support Act of 2019. And this is overall addition to these two bills. And once these bill, as Tenzin Sudu just now said, that when the moment President Joe Biden signs, they will become act, which means they will be part of the Constitution of America. Then every future President of America, every State Secretary of America, every agency of America will be obliged to act on these lines. And do you know what are these lines? I have jolted, just to make it short, I observed America has made, or the American Congress has made 7 points which blast President Xi Jinping's every single narrative on which he claims control on Tibet or on, East Turkestan or South Mongolia. And especially in context of Tibet, why I say this visit is very, very historic. One is the timing. It's a bipartisan. It's not one only ruling party's attempt. It is both parties who are doing it. The delegation is comprising, you have already mentioned, very, very senior people. They are coming day after they have signed, they have passed the bill in both houses. They are here when the National Security Advisor of America, Jack Sullivan, is already in India. Modi's government has just started its third term. So this is not something small.
Okay.
So America.
Okay.
Now I will tell you.
Now
just a moment. Let me tell you why it is historic. There are 7 points. One is this bill. They say it is Resolve Tibet Act, but in reality, if you read the text, there are at least 7 points which are against everything China stands for or Xi Jinping stands. It announces officially Tibet is an occupied country and an unsettled issue. It says that Tibet was never a part of China, which Xi Jinping wants Dalai Lama to sign, that Tibet was always a part of China. It says even the definition of Tibet has been given in this law, which says that Tibet is not only Tibet Autonomous Region. It includes all the parts which have been incorporated from the Kham and Amdo provinces of Tibet into Yunnan, Sichuan, Qinghai, and Gansu provinces of China. Then it says that dialogue with Dalai Lama, this is something very interesting in the latest bill. It has expanded the definition of who will be in the dialogue.
Okay.
It says not only Dalai Lama and his representatives, but the elected representatives, which means America has given an infinite shelf life to the Tibetan side, whether Dalai Lama is here or not. And then the last 2 points are on reincarnation. This bill very clearly says that Xi Jinping or Communist Party of China or the government of China have no locus standi, and it obliges this and the future governments of America to contest China and punish those Chinese leaders who make an attempt to install a puppet Dalai Lama of their choice.
Okay.
And we have already discussed.
All right. Coming back to you then, Ambassador Sikri, it all hinges on the cooperation of the Chinese government. What are the hopes that this will happen? There are already precedents set on how China treats the Tibetans. There have been instances where systematically there are Chinese villages that are being built, there are settlements that are being built and populating them with Chinese population along the borders. We talk about illegal occupation, we talk about building of air bases, we talk about building of army bases over there, roads. How does this impact the situation, which is very volatile, particularly in wake of India and China military attacks that take place along the line of actual control? Ambassador Sikri.
Yeah, that's right. I think the bill is of great significance for 2 reasons. First of all, for us in India, we know that we have a border only with Tibet. We do not have a border with China. We have a border with Tibet. So we are very, very concerned about, the freedom of the people of Tibet and how this particular bill will impact the situation in Tibet and all the other parts of Tibet which have been incorporated in different provinces of China. And the reason is that so far, US government has very specifically followed the policy, the One China policy, the stated One China policy. And, that the integration of China, not only with Tibet as a part of China, but Taiwan, all that. So now with this bill, once it is signed by President Biden, and it is very significant that this is being signed by a Democratic president, because they are the ones who have earlier, even when President Bill Clinton was there, he was so firm on supporting China on the One China policy. So the very fact that this bill has come into being, does it impact the American government's One China policy? Now, this is a very significant question that we have to very carefully follow and see to what extent this bill, the adoption of the bill, the signing of the bill by the president, and then the implementation of the bill, in what way will these 3 steps impact and throw aside what has been very carefully structured so far as the US government support for the One China policy. So this is a very important thing that we have to follow, and I think that we've heard from our colleagues from the Tibetan administration and the Tibetan movement, the Free Tibet movement, and we've seen how excited and happy they are with this bill having been passed, and now the prospects of President Biden signing this bill into law. And the subsequent actions, a coordinator will be appointed for Tibet. So what will that coordinator do? He'll have to first make a policy statement on Tibet? What is the
Right.
American government's policy? These
Very
are very
important
serious
point.
steps, and for us, we have to follow it very, very carefully.
Absolutely. Also, Ambassador Sikri, just a few weeks ago, there were reports of how India had decided to rename certain parts of Tibet, which had been given Chinese names. How important and integral it becomes for the Indian government to partake in this resolution, in bringing about an act that will then be anti-China and pro-Tibet, and why have we not been able to do so, especially when we are taking such very aggressive steps of renaming certain areas in certain regions of Tibet?
Well, everything has to go step by step. We do know, for example, that we, on our side, we have really strengthened our defenses and our presence in that bordering area ever since the post, the Galwan issue and the 2020 events. We have left no stone unturned, and we have firmly rejected any attempts by China to rename places in India, in Arunachal Pradesh and other places. We have firmly rejected it as being absolutely unacceptable and wrong. But we do know, we in India always remember the strong and positive relations India has had with Tibet. We do know, for example, there was a time, when the British Indian government was fully represented in Tibet. Our colleagues from Dharamshala have spoken about the Indian consulate in Lhasa. We had trade representations, we had consulates. In fact, the Indian government was supporting the government of Tibet, and we were helping them in running their postal, their telegraph, and the telephone services. And I remember that when all this ended, and there was this talk about what to do with all those provisions, technical equipment that was lying there, and so on, because we were doing that. We were helping Tibet in every way to develop themselves and to come out of isolation and to be part of the world mainstream. And with the invasion of China, all that process ended, and we have followed this position for a long time. But once this bill comes into force in the USA, I'm sure there'll be discussions between the US and Indian governments also on this, because the US bill mandates the US government to talk about it with other countries.
Yes,
and certainly
absolutely.
we talk about between India and China, and let us see how the situation develops.
Okay, all right. I'm out of time, but I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast. A massively significant event that has taken place, and this opens up doors for other countries, including India, to pass bills that will allow for strengthening of the Free Tibet campaign and the autonomy of the country.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.